Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Sukirti Madhavi.
Amren Gaurdas.
Welcoming you for trimester 5, session 6, Gita Mastery course, chapter number 15. Before we get into the chapter, you would be very happy to know that today we are completing 1 year of Gita Mastery course. We started it way back on 3rd October 2020. So, is there any problem? Okay. So here we are completing this 1 year, and let's begin with our Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapad Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhuva evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Mukham karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yatkripatamaham vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. So we will begin with our Gita Rewind, the quiz from the 4 verses of chapter 15, which we have covered in the last session. We are also assuming that you have completed the quiz for chapter 14. It's already up there on the website. So those of you who have not completed can complete chapter 14 quiz at their earliest. So here are the questions from chapter 15, first 4 verses. Question number 1. Tree's reflection on water is compared to spiritual world's reflection on And 67% of you have got it wrong. So the correct answer is C, desire. So it is explained in detail there that how the whole, like when we are standing at the bank of a river
Lake.
and we see the reflection of that tree on water. So similarly, instead of water, this whole material world is made, or rather resting on desire, because we desire to enjoy, and that is why this whole cosmic manifestation is in place. So the correct option is C, desire.
Next question. One who knows. And the correct answer is A, imperishable banyan tree is a true knower of the Vedas. So it appears that there's a lot of guesswork going on when we are marking the answers. We look at them and we try to guess, what seems to be the right answer. I think it's better that we become a little more serious with these sessions. The process is that we should read Bhagavad Gita as it is. We should go through the translations and purports. And then we should actually ideally come for these sessions, because these sessions, they provide an overview, but the kind of detail which is there in the each purport of Srila Prabhupada, of course, is not practical to be presented completely here. So, and after the session is over, we have the class notes which we put up. So, there's some amount of review which is required for each session. Otherwise, we will just do some guesswork and mark some answers, and so that your learning would not be complete. So, our desire is that somehow you should have you should learn all these principles properly.
Question 3, by cultivating transcendental desires, one can be freed from material entanglement. So correct answer is the third one.
Sorry?
The third question is finished, yes. By cultivating transcendental desire.
Okay, question 4. The heavenly planets are situated beyond the tree, and the answer is false. Heavenly planets are very much part of this material world. And we saw this inverted tree was there, the roots were up, the branches were down, and the heavenly planets were towards the top portion, and they're very much within the part of this reflected tree on the material world.
The next question, the branches of the tree refer to planet of different species. So the correct answer is B. Somehow the answer to the quiz is, all the questions this time, it's not to the mark. Many of you have made mistakes there. So what I strongly recommend is go back to the recording of the last session and again attend the session where we are discussing from chapter 15 onwards. So just the 4 shlokas, but please do attend it again, because majority of you are not getting the right answers this time. The next question, how to cut down this strongly rooted tree? So yes, with determination and detachment. Correct answer is B.
Question 6. How to cut down this? Okay, question 7. One can perceive the real form of the tree in this material world by jnana. And the answer is false. The correct answer is B, false. It cannot be perceived within this material world. That's what Krishna says.
Material world is a tree nourished by the 3 modes. So the correct option is A, the 3 modes of material nature.
So, okay, we'll review this particular few verses again when we look at the this particular section.
So
breakup.
Yes. So here it is, chapter number 15, 1 to 4, what we have already discussed. Now, Krishna opens this chapter with a very strong and emphatic analogy where he talks about a perverted reflection of a tree. He says that this material world actually, it's like a banyan tree, imperishable banyan tree, but which is not regular banyan tree. It is upside down. It is ulta. So this material world is actually upside down reflection of the spiritual world. So if spiritual world, whatever things are considered to be the highest, in this material world, those things are at the lowest rung. So that is how the whole tree is upside down. And the original tree of the spiritual world, so now it is getting reflected on the desire for enjoyment. So instead of water, the water has been replaced with the desire. So we all want to enjoy, and that is why we are in this material world. the real root of this material existence grows upward. So because it is upside down, so generally always the tree's roots go down. But here is a tree whose roots are going up because the tree is inverted. And we all, the living entity in different bodies, we are actually bound here to the material world because we are doing these action and reaction. So fruitive action of human society. And that's why we are bound here. And the second thing, or the subsidiary root which is bounding us here, are attachments and aversion. So we like something, we dislike something, and based on our liking and disliking or attachment and aversion, we actually do action and reaction.
So there are different branches of this tree. The roots are up, the branches are down, and there are different branches. There are upper branches, there are lower branches, and these refer to the higher planetary systems and the lower planetary systems. And this tree, as it is a tree, it has leaves as well. These leaves are the Vedic hymns. The twigs, branches are big, twigs are small. The small twigs are the sense objects, and the tip of the branches are the senses. And this tree, as any tree would have fruits, and a banyan tree also has small fruits. So this tree also has fruits, and the fruits are dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So when one performs dharma, which means one follows the laws of nature as they are given by the Supreme Lord, when one follows dharma, then one gets artha or resources. One gets wealth, one gets whatever one desires. So by performing dharma, one gets artha, the resources. Then he uses these resources to satisfy his material desires or kam. And gradually, if the person is following dharma, there is some purification gradually may happen of his heart, and he may understand that despite I'm trying to fulfill my desires and they're also getting fulfilled, but I have to go through the trouble of birth, death, old age, and disease. I have to go through adhyatmic, adi bhautik, adi daivik problems. So it is better that actually I look for some permanent solution to all these problems, and then the person might look for moksha. So these are the fruits of this tree: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. And how is this tree nourished? This tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. So somebody is nourished. If I am nourished by mode of sattva gun, or mode of goodness, then I would more likely to do pious activities. And by doing pious activities, I go to higher planetary systems, I develop sattvic qualities. If I am nourished by mode of passion, I remain on earthly plane. Sometimes I engage in piety, sometimes I engage in sinful activities, depending on whatever helps me get to my goals quickly. And when I am influenced by mode of ignorance, then wrong actions I consider as right, and then I engage in sinful activities, and I'm destined towards lower species of life. So that is how this whole tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature.
And how do I get out of the tree? So I'm stuck on this tree, I'm bound to this tree, I keep jumping from one branch to another, but how do I get out of the tree? So the only way out is through detachment, and we have to use with determination. We have to be determined to become detached. And how that detachment completely comes to us? When we become attached to Krishna, when we surrender to the Supreme Lord. So the next verse number 5, would talk about this process of surrendering to the Lord. So hope it is clear what we have discussed. I would again repeat, kindly go back and listen to the recording of those 4 verses in the last session, what we have discussed, because it is quite important for us to understand how we are stuck here. And unless we understand that, we will not make any efforts of getting out of here. So Krishna has given a beautiful allegory to explain that to us.
Okay, so if you have questions regarding this tree and reflection, please stay back at the end of the session, and we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, doubts, even regarding the quiz, we will discuss it at that time.
So let's get into chapter shloka number 5. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama dvandvair vimukta sukha dukha sangyer gacchantya moda padam avyayam tat.
those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So we see this, the flow. Krishna explains in the beginning that this material world is like an inverted banyan tree. The roots are up, the branches and the leaves are down. That's how this tree is. And then we understand that this is actually a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Spiritual world is the actual real world, and this world is reflected on desire. That very simply means that if we this the presence or the existence of this material world is simply because we desire to enjoy separately from the Supreme Lord. Because we do not want to serve Him, we want to independently live and survive and enjoy. So, therefore, this material world is created. Very simply put. And then Krishna explains that one understands the futility of this material world, and then one understands that he has to get out of this material world. So, he has to use the weapon of detachment. So there are two things. One has to detach from this material world, and second, one has to be attached to the Supreme Lord, attached to the Supreme Abode. So both the things are required. So here Krishna is explaining that what are the qualities that help us perform our surrender ourselves to the Supreme Lord. So there are some positive qualities like we saw in the previous verses, where Krishna spoke about humility, Krishna spoke about accepting a bona fide spiritual master, following his instructions. So all those Krishna said. And here we have certain things which obstruct us from surrendering to the Supreme Lord. So what are those things that obstruct us? So here, if you look at the Sanskrit, the words are man, moha, sangha. So man means false prestige or pride. Right, so we'll notice that each one of us are infested with some amount of pride. We may be proud of our family heritage. Some of us are proud of, I don't know, the position that we hold. Some of us are proud of our wealth. Some or the other reason we find to be proud of. So we are proud, and then moha, we are illusioned, and sangha, we associate with people who are not interested in spiritual life. Genuine spiritual life, people are not interested. So these are all obstructions. Nirmana moha jita sangha dosha. So one who is free from all of these. So one has to become free from all of these to progress and to surrender to the Supreme Lord. A proud person does not really surrender. There are people whose family wants to visit a temple, they will stay down, they will not come up for whatever reason. The family will go up and have darshan. Or some people come up and they do not feel like offering respects to the deities, right? Or they may find faults with the temple, they may find faults with the devotees, so many things. So some amount of pride, illusion is there. So one has to be free from all this. And then what else Krishna says? Adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama. So those who understand the eternal. So we understand that spirit souls are eternal. We understand the Supreme Lord is eternal. We understand this material world is also eternal, as well as the spiritual world. So one who understands the reality of the creation of the Lord. So one who understands that, and vinivritta kama, one who are done with material lust. Like we saw that why we are continuously in this cycle of birth and death. The search for happiness never ends. We think this will give me happiness, that will give me happiness, and in between the body finishes, the time in the body finishes, but search doesn't end. So such a person cannot really surrender to the Lord. So who can surrender? Who are done with materialists, who understand very clearly that this hunting for happiness in this material world, hunting for material objects, will ultimately not give me happiness. It may give some temporary happiness here and there, but it accompanies with so much of trouble, and this happiness itself is also for limited time. So intelligent people are done with materialism. They do not pursue this. And Krishna further says, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress. So they understand that what is happiness in the material world. What I like, if I get the senses, the eyes, if they see something beautiful, if I get something tasty to eat, what I consider as tasty, then I feel it's so good. So I'm so happy. And when I'm devoid, when I'm not given those objects, then I feel it is such a miserable existence. Again, a spiritually enlightened, knowledgeable, intelligent person understands that it is just matter interacting with matter, because that tasty food does not really has anything to do with soul. Or any object, beautiful object in this material world is all temporary, is made up of matter, and it has nothing to do with spirit soul. So they understand this happiness and distress is actually only interaction of, actually it's an existence of mind. Only in the mind we experience, we consider certain thing as happiness and certain thing as distress. So this person, he is freed from that. He distances himself from the material happiness and distress, and he knows that they keep coming in like a two sides of a coin. Sometimes it's head, sometimes it's tail. Sometimes it's happiness, sometimes it's distress. So unbewildered, he surrenders. Then he can actually surrender and attain to the supreme abode of the Lord. What is the surrendering process? So these are the obstacles which we face, not may, we are facing, and we should be free from them. We should be free from false prestige and pride. So actually this whole list, if you want, you can take a screenshot. This is a checklist of things that we should be free from. So we are always talking about what are the do's and what are the don'ts. So these are in one way the don'ts. So we have to be, not to be pride. We have to give up this illusion that I am this body. We have to be free from the association of materialistic people who are not interested in spiritual life. So these are the don'ts. So we have to be free from all of them. And then we actually gradually begin to surrender in a determined and consistent way.
Freedom from pride, illusion, dualities, false association, and lust is the real freedom. And we keep claiming for freedom based on bodily identification. So when we talk of freedom, when we talk of independence, we want that independence as a body. So as a lady, I want certain degree of freedom. As a teenager, I want some freedom from my parents. As a student, I want freedom in exercising my choices I want to make. As a journalist or a media person, I want freedom. But here it is mentioned that the real freedom is freedom from pride, delusion, dualities, false association, and lust. So we must aspire for these freedom and not for the freedom based on bodily identification.
So some of you are asking questions. Please hold on to the questions. Raise your hand at the end of the session, and we'll definitely take all your questions. So yeah, that's a.
न तद्भाषयते सूर्यो न शशाङ्को न पावकः यद्गत्वा न निवर्तन्ते तद्धाम परमं मम. So mama means mine. Now Krishna is going to describe something of his own, something which is very dear to him. What is that? He says dham paramam. Dham means abode or place where he resides, and Parama means supreme. So Krishna is now telling about his own supreme abode, and before that he is saying, so why this verse is coming here is because in the 5th verse he was talking about the process of surrender. If a person successfully surrenders, then this is the result what he attains. So he is describing the characteristic of that supreme abode where a detached and surrendered soul will go. And he also tells that if a person goes there, then what happens to that person? So let's read it out. Krishna is saying that supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. So Krishna is saying, Natad bhashayate. Bhashayate means prakash or lightened up by Surya, Shashank, Pavakaha. So these things are not needed, which means any artificial object to light up that place is not required. Now the question may arise, is it a dark dungeon place where Krishna is telling that the surrendered soul would reach? If yes, then I don't want to go there.
No, that's our material world. We're already living in a very dark place. So if there's no sun,
If there's no sun also in the material world.
no sun and no moon, then we are completely in a...
So Krishna is telling here that these places, the sun, moon, and the fire electricity are not needed because it is self-illuminating. It's a bright, lit place which emanates light. So that is spiritual world. And he says, Yad Gatvana Nivartante. When a person goes there, those who reach it never return to this material world. So that is the beauty of the place, what Krishna is telling. So let's see a peek preview in that, beautiful place of Krishna's.
Of touchstone, where there are Surabhi cows which give unlimited milk. There are Kalpavriksha trees that fulfill all desires. It is in this land of Vrindavan where Lord Shri Krishna grazes the cows and performs the astonishing rasa dance with unlimited gopis. Here, every word is a song and every step is a dance. When the wind blows over the lotus flowers in the water of Yamuna, the whole of Vrindavan becomes aromatic. On the banks of river Yamuna, in the dense forest of Kadamba trees, Vrindavan damsels experience supreme bliss when they hear the sweet melody of their beloved Krishna's flute. Vrindavan is full of those fruits, flowers and creepers which carry the imprints of the divine couple. This divine couple is Srimati Radharani and Shri Krishna. Srimati Radhika is like a dazzling light and Krishna is like a black rain cloud. Because of the auspicious and sweet pastimes of Shri Radha, the living and the non-living entities of Vrindavan are always blissful in the mood of a celebration. Even the deers of Vrindavan become full of emotions when they hear the delightful sounds of Krishna's flute. The attractive groves of Vrindavan witnesses unlimited pastimes, where the heroine, Srimati Radhika, very cleverly wins the loving arguments with the hero Shri Krishna. They are witness to the enchanting dances of Krishna that he beautifully performs. There is no better dancer or a dance teacher other than Krishna in the three worlds. Every atom of Vrindavan is inundated with love for Krishna. Every person living in Vrindavan has just one desire, and that is the happiness of Srimati Radharani and Shri Krishna. Everyone is chanting their glories. They just think that Radha Krishna Pran Mora.
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Hare
Krishna
Rama
Krishna
Hare
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 Krishna
Rama
Krishna.
Hare Hare. So that is a very short glimpse of the Golok Vrindavan, and of course we did two short podcasts, or three rather short podcasts before Janmashtami. So there was a description of the Golok Vrindavan, the abode of the Lord. So the only way to achieve the supreme abode of the Lord is to surrender to his lotus feet. So of course it is Krishna's home and Krishna's abode. Unless Krishna agrees or allows us in, we cannot go in. And the process is that we surrender to him, we establish a loving devotional service relationship with him. Then it is possible. So so let's look at why there is no light source. These are the key learning objectives of this particular word. So why there is no light source required? Because all the planets are self-luminous. The planets themselves emanate light, and their shining effulgence is called Brahmajyoti. So the Lord and his spiritual abode, they are all self-luminous because of the potency of the Lord. And why is this information being shared by Krishna here? And of the supreme abode is being given here. Why is Krishna talking about his home? So that we become captivated by this information. and we try to extricate ourselves from this material world and go to the spiritual world. Just I'll give you an example. So many people in India are enamored by Western civilization. They hear, they see the Western movies, American movies, they see so much is happening in the news, and they become enamored that I want to go to the US, I want to somehow or the other go there and relocate, or to Europe. So much enamored is there because we see, we hear, and we develop that desire and attachment. So, well, like that happens. Similarly, if we hear and read about the spiritual world, then gradually our heart will become purified, and we would become so attracted that we would want to go there. So that is why Krishna has given that information, and of course the process is gradual development of Krishna consciousness, and as we advance in Krishna consciousness, we will develop detachment from this material world. So this is one important principle of spiritual life which is coming up. It's a life lesson that one cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world. This is not possible. If you want to give things up, this is very troublesome. I have to detach myself from the material world. This is very difficult. So how it is practical? When we become attached to the Lord, attached to the abode of the Lord, attached to His service, we become so much attracted by the Lord and His service, then I can naturally give up the material world. So the attachment induces the attachment, spiritual attachment induces the detachment from this material world. So this principle we always need to understand. That is why we always emphasize that, Prabhupada would emphasize that we should chant the holy names of the Lord. We should study scriptures. We should associate with devotees. We should eat prasadam. So when we do these activities, then naturally the bad habits, they leave us and they go. We don't have to give them up. They leave us and they run away from us. Anartha nivritti. So anarthas, unwanted things, they go away from our life. So we come to the next section, verses 7 to 11, and this particular section talks about the transmigration of soul. Krishna explained the nature of this material world as an upsided reflected tree of a reflection of the spiritual world. He explains that we have to get free from this material world or this tree by cut down this tree by the axe of detachment. One has to develop attachment and surrender to the Supreme Lord. So all that Krishna explained in the previous verses, and then he explained about the spiritual abode, that how we must become attracted to that. And then Krishna further explains that if we continue to remain in this material world, what will happen? We'll continue to transmigrate from one body to another. So Krishna is giving that detail here. And in these verses, the mind is the one which actually determines Jiva's future. So this is a very important principle. It is because of the mind. What we think, what is the mind attached to, is what drags us, is what determines our future in this material world. Mamaivaamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manashasthani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. So this is a memory verse. Verse 7 is a memory verse. So please make a note of that. And Krishna is revealing some more information about us. So Krishna gave a lot of information in the second chapter. In second chapter, Krishna said that we are all spirit souls. We are not this material body. We are eternal. There are many, many qualities which Krishna gave, that the soul cannot be cut, cannot be burnt, cannot be moistened by water. It is eternal. It is what else? So many qualities Krishna spoke about the spirit soul. And then Krishna is revealing further details. And what is that? Mamai Vamsho Jiva Loke. That these living entities are my fragmental parts. So Krishna is establishing or revealing our eternal relationship with Him. This is so wonderful. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So this is very, very important verse, where we understand our eternal relationship with Krishna, that we are his eternal fragmental parts. So which means we have an eternal relationship with Krishna, who? All living entities. Irrespective of what one's belief system is, whether one believes in some religion, where there's so many religions in this material world, or whether one is in a human form or an animal form or a plant form, this is applicable for all the living entities, that all of them are actually Krishna's part and parcel. And Krishna is saying, but despite being my part and parcel, they are struggling in this material world. And why is that? Mana shasthani indriyani. So there are these knowledge gathering senses, and then there is mind, the king of senses, the sixth sense, which is actually because it is attached to so many things. So that's why it is getting dragged in this material world. Prakriti sthani karshati, are struggling very, very hard. So this is what is our actually situation in this material world. So Mamai Vamso Jiva Loke, I mean, this point is very important. We are eternally related to Krishna. And Prabhupada makes a very interesting statement in one of his lectures. He says that Krishna consciousness is our birthright. For every living entity, it is birthright. So Krishna consciousness is not artificial. It is not externally imposed upon us, like a father and son. Though son may go away, son may forget about father, son may not be interested in father. But does that relationship ever go away? Of a father and son, we may want to forget it, but we cannot ignore it, in the sense that it never becomes non-existent. So whether we are in any body, we believe in any religious system, we are actually we are always connected with the Supreme Lord, because he is our eternal Father. So Krishna consciousness is not artificial. And also fragmental part does not mean like we break a glass bottle, so it breaks into fragments, and if you join it back, if it is joinable, then you get the bottle back. It's not that kind of thing, because matter can be broken and matter can be joined back. But that's why Krishna uses the word, what the word he used? Sanatan. He uses the word Sanatan, that we are eternally fragmented parts. It is not that we had a birth at a particular point. We have always existed eternally, and we are eternally fragmental parts of the Lord. So identity of the living entity has been clarified, and our current position is that we are struggling very hard with mind and the senses in the material world. So what happens is, so we have these senses and we have the mind, and we have particular preferences, like all of us, 130 of us are listening here, and I'm sure each one of us may have different preferences of things that we like to eat. Some of us may prefer South Indian food, some of us may prefer North Indian food, or different kinds of food. For breakfast, some may prefer idli, dosa, some may prefer parathas. So I'm just saying, so we have different kinds of preference. So we have the same tongue, but we have a difference of preference. Similarly, like there is an animal, like a pig. Pig is also having a tongue. I also have a tongue. His preferences, what he likes and what I like, are different. So this life, we are developing certain types of preferences. Based on those preferences of the mind, of the senses, we get a particular body, right? So Krishna speaks some very, very beautiful verses in this regard, and we'll look at those verses shortly. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. So our situation is like this man whose legs are bound with iron chains, and at the end of that iron chain there is a huge iron ball, and we are dragging it, right? So in this material, we are bound with this false ego. We are so firmly convinced that we are this material body, and others are their bodies. We are so firmly convinced of this fact. We live our life in that way, and that is called bound by false ego. So it is like iron chains. Like, sometimes we see a very deadly criminal. So they will bind his hands, they will bind his legs, all of them are cuffed, and the hands and legs are also chained. Because he's very high risk prisoner and he may run away here and there. So they are very tightly, they'll bind him. So like that, we are bind with this conception that I am this body. And Krishna, this statement is from Prabhupada, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material. So like this, we are bound. I am this body, I am this body, I am this body, and I have certain preferences. I like to enjoy like a hog. I like to enjoy like a dog. And then, with the mind and the senses, they will drive us to achieve that body at the time of death. The misuse of minute independence, one becomes a conditioned soul. And by proper use of independence, one is always liberated. So this is the catalyst. Like when we studied chemistry, a catalyst in a chemical reaction, sometimes the chemical reaction doesn't happen. Despite all the correct conditions, the reaction doesn't happen. So we learn that if there is a catalyst, and catalyst has to be a very, very small, minute quantity, just place the catalyst there and the reaction happens. So this is the catalyst, our independence. If we use this independence properly, that is by engaging ourselves, we make a conscious choice. I want to chant. I like chanting. Hare Krishna. I want to read. I like reading Bhagavad Gita. I like reading Srimad Bhagavatam. I want to study scriptures. I like associating with devotees. I want to do that. That is a need of my soul. So I am consciously making that choice. I am using my free will, that independence, in the right direction. The proper use of the independence. Then I will be liberated. Same thing if I say, no, these Hare Krishnas, they are always talking about chanting, they are always talking about Ekadashi, about reading, about studying, about hearing. Let me, so if I do not have that preference, if I do not use my independence to do that, then I am conditioned soul. I am like that shackled person in this material world. Shariram yadavapnoti yachapi utkramatishvaraha grahit vaitani samyati vayur gandhani vashayat. So here Krishna gives us another analogy. And what analogy is he giving? Vayur gandhani vashayat. Vayur, so like the air carries aroma. So Krishna is giving that analogy. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aroma. Thus he takes one kind of body and quits it to take another. So like air, so air has no smell. Air has actually no smell. But if the air passes over garbage, oh, it stinks. And if the air passes over a nice fragrant flower, a tree having fragrant flowers, then it smells so wonderful. So like the air carries the aroma, similarly the spirit soul is actually pure. Because we have fragmental parts of the Lord, we are actually pure. But because we have this material desire, we are in this material world, we are influenced by the modes of material nature, so we have a certain conception of life. I want to enjoy like this. I want to enjoy like that. So I have different conceptions of life, of enjoyment. And that is the reason why we move from one body to another. So this is the analogy which Krishna has given. Like the air carries the aroma, we carry certain conceptions of life or certain types of enjoyment that we are seeking for, that search for happiness in a particular way, and that is why we keep changing bodies. So this Krishna is giving the explanation of why we transmigrate from one body to another. So change of the body depends on one's consciousness at the time of death. That is true. That in turn depends on how one lives the entire life. So act responsibly as the future is being designed now. So I've seen in devotees' houses, they're young children. Somebody brings some nice ripe fruits or some some sweets or something. And what the child will ask, usually for children it's very difficult to control their senses. But I've seen devotee children, what they'll say, Mama, for example, a guest brings something and offers to the child. The child will ask mother, Mother, is this offered? Can I take? It is not offered. The child is so conscious. So the child will make sure the mother offers it to the Lord, or he will offer to the Lord, and then he will take. So you see that how the preferences change in this life. So if our preference is that I will speak only about Krishna, I will eat only prasadam, I will not put any other thing in my mouth. If I want to hear, I will like to hear something related to God. If I want to see something, I will want to see something related to God. So if these kind of preferences I gradually develop, then my consciousness will change. My preferences have already changed. And accordingly, my destiny is actually fixed up when I die. Shrotram chakshu sparshanam cha rasanam grahanam eva cha adhisthaya manaschayam vishayan upasevate. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So he already has a certain type of preferences and the mother nature. So if you remember in one of the previous sessions way back, I think in the second chapter we discussed that we are like a customer and we go to the tailor. And depending on our preferences and desire, the tailor cuts a particular dress for us, stitches a particular dress for us. So some want full sleeves, some want half sleeves, some want dress without sleeves, right? So depending on our preferences, the tailor stitches a dress according to us. So similarly, because like the air carries the aroma, we carry a certain conception of life, and based on that, Mother Nature gives us another gross body. So there is a particular type of ear, an eye, a tongue, nose, sense of touch. And all of these are grouped about the mind. So the other day I was actually looking at, we have a big fat chipkali. What do you call chipkali in English? Lizard. Yes, thank you. So there's a big fat lizard just outside our house, and I was one day I was observing. So lizard also has an ear, and somehow it was on the wall and I could see directly into the ear. So there is no outside, there is just a hole on the skin, and inside the whatever the membrane was, it was shining like a piece of metal. So I was just amazed. So we see the animals and we can very clearly see that they have these eyes, ears and all, and they are for particular type. If you look at the tongue of a dog, the way it is salivating and the way the tongues are hanging out and the way they drink is different. And if you look at a cow, the tongue is different and the way they do things are a little different from the dog. So because of their preferences, these things are designed differently. Some of us may think, Arey, but the plants don't have eyes. We don't see eyes for the plants. We don't see ears for plants. But the research shows, even common sense shows, that how the plants are sensitive to light. They may not have the eyes like us, but they can perceive the electromagnetic radiation. They can actually hear also. So the plants respond differently to different types of sounds. There is so much research has happened in that regard as well. So this is how they get different kinds of senses which are grouped around the mind, and they thus enjoy particular sense objects. So Prabhupada explains that, like if we take pure water, right? So it is transparent, there is no impurity in it. And if we add yellow ink, then the water changes. It looks yellowish. If we add red ink, it appears reddish. If we add black ink, it appears blackish or bluish. So there are, like the water, it has certain type of things, so it changes. Similarly, our consciousness is clean and pure, but because of our desire to enjoy, we associate with different modes and our consciousness changes. It gets colored by the different modes, right? Like we see in this background, this beautiful mixture of color. Of course, this appears beautiful, but this is our unfortunate situation in the material world. So consciousness is clean, but because we come in touch with the modes, it gets contaminated. Like the water gets colored by different addition of different colors to it. And here we see that there are different species: the dog, the cat, the horse, the human, the fish, the bird. So what is the process of transmigration? The soul is carried by the mind. One enters various bodies to obtain different senses for the goal of sense enjoyment. So it is 11:57. There are a few more verses. We'll just complete them, and please bear with me. So, life lesson. One's consciousness changes according to the association of material qualities. Real consciousness is Krishna consciousness. So, if we associate with objects and people in Rajogun, we will become Rajogunic. Like, if we go to Holy Dham, we go to Vrindavan, we go to Sridham Mayapur, we are there for 5, 6, 7, 8 days. We are attending morning program and we are going with devotees to different holy places. We hear about the holy places. We chant nicely. We go for Ganga bath, or in Vrindavan we go for Yamuna bath. Our whole consciousness is so blissful. And then we catch a bus or a train or a taxi back. So when we are entering Delhi, then we can understand, oh, so much of Rajogun, buses and trucks and cars and so much traffic, everything is so difficult. People are so aggressive. People are aggressive everywhere. So we see that how our environment is charged with certain modes and we obtain those same qualities. But if we consciously try to associate with spiritual objects and people and holy names, then our consciousness is firmed up. So more advanced devotees, despite wherever they go, their consciousness is not disturbed. And so the next subsection. So soul is transmigrating, like the air carries the aroma, the mind carries certain conception, and accordingly the different senses are given by the mother nature. Who can see and who cannot? Soul's transmigration, who can and who cannot see it? So let's look at those people. उत्क्रामन्तं स्थितं वापि भुञ्जानं वा गुणान्वितं विमूढा नाप्नु पश्यन्ति ज्ञानचक्षुषः. So who can see, who cannot see? The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. So foolish people cannot see. Those of us who were with us in the second chapter, we discussed about near-death experiences, we discussed about past life memories, and there are so many doctors, scientists, researchers. There are universities, who have departments on this, and they're all, they have facts in front of this. It is a fact, right? There are so many case studies. So this is all factual information, and still they cannot understand. They're thinking how the consciousness gets transferred. Is it the brain? Is it the mind? What is it? Is it at the quantum level? So many things they are speculating, right? Only if they study Bhagavad Gita, then this problem is solved immediately. But they need to have faith. So the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit this body, right? So they cannot understand this process of transmigration. They do not understand that how there are different bodies in different modes and the living entity is actually living in them. But who can see? Pashyati Jnana Chakshusha, but one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So like those of you who were there with us for Gita Made Easy, Gita Mastery Course, Bhakti Yoga Made Easy, gradually we are getting trained. With this knowledge, we are getting trained, right? Gradually a training ourselves to beginning to see this. Like some of you wrote emails that when you suffered personal loss, somebody whom you loved, and suddenly they left you, somebody died in the family, then how the perception of that event had changed for you. How if the same thing would have happened 4 or 5 years back, and how it happened now, and how the whole understanding and the way we responded to the situation was very different. So how did that happen? Because we got little bit training in this direction. So the more and more we get trained, more and more we will actually can see through the eyes of knowledge. Jnana Chakshu, eyes of knowledge. We can see through the eyes of Bhagavad Gita. So who are those who cannot see? Those who are having foolish mentality. Who what they cannot see? They cannot see that a living entity quits this body and it enters into another body. So for these foolish people, death is the end. And that's why we see there are so many criminals and there are so many people who want their enemies to be dead. Right? So because they think death is the end of the story. Right? So they are foolish actually. They do not understand that actually living entity continues after this body, go to the another one. You cannot really kill the person, only the body. And what sort of body he enjoys under the modes of material nature? The foolish, they cannot see this. And people who have this Gyan Chakshu, they can. So who are they? They are those who have the eyes of knowledge. They have studied carefully, they have understood carefully, and they have beginning to apply these principles in their life. So they are the ones who have eyes of knowledge. How did they acquire this knowledge? Of course, they acquired this from a genuine spiritual master. In our case, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who represents the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya bona fide Sampradaya. We have received this knowledge directly from Krishna in this Sampradaya. So this is how they acquire the right knowledge, genuine knowledge. And what do they see? They see that spirit is different from body, right? So some of us have beginning to understand and realize this. Yes, I am different from the body. My body may be aging, but not me, right? And they see that how the jiva, the living entity, changes the body in search of enjoyment. So if I continue to not change my life, my goal, my preferences, then I will definitely get into another cycle of birth and death. And once they understand this, what do? They share this knowledge with people in general, right? So this is a very wonderful slide about what a person with Gyan Chakshu does. Persons who are everlastingly fooled by lust and desire lose all power to understand their change of body and their stay in a particular body. They cannot comprehend it. Develop spiritual knowledge in bona fide parampara and perfect your life. So lust and desire, it is like a fire. And if you put fuel, so if you try to satisfy your desire, if you try to satisfy your lust, it will only grow. It's a very simple principle Krishna gives in Bhagavad Gita. Like a fire, if it is fed with fuel, it will only grow. Similarly, if we try to satisfy our lust or desire, they will only expand. They'll only increase. And then we will not have the ability to understand all of this. They cannot just simply comprehend this. So we have to develop spiritual knowledge from a bona fide parampara, and then changes are brought about in our lives. So that brings us to the last verse of the day. Yatanto yogi naschainam pashyanti atmani avasthitam yatanto piyakratatmano nainam pashyanti achetasaha. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. So we have to become yogis, we have to become bhakti yogis. So that is why there is so much of emphasis that we must chant the holy names regularly, sincerely, nicely every day. We must hear, we must read Srila Prabhupada books, we must hear from devotees. We must take prasad, we must purify our senses, our mind, we must purify our existence. And then we become situated in self-realization, we can see all of this very, very clearly. But others cannot see. It is not possible for them. So with practice, self-realized souls can see this. So this is a very beautiful slide. You can see many, many pictures. So how we are traveling in this material, in this human form, from birth, we grow up, we get adult bodies, then we dwindle, we die. And then some of us go to different species. There are many, many different species. So we are continuously changing bodies. Even in this life, we are changing bodies. Right? But if we are sincere in spiritual life only, then we can actually perceive. Otherwise, it's not possible. So thank you very much for joining in today and having patience and holding on. So we have reading assignment verses 12 to 20. This is the reading assignment. Kindly read these verses for the next session. By this we will be completing the this current chapter. And the memory verse, as I told you, is the verse number 7. Mamai Vamshu Jiva Loke. So that's the memory verse. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.